Okay, so basically, we're starting off with psychology and health. And before I start the first topic, which is patient and practitioner, just an overview for all that we will be covering under psychology and health. Or will be five different topics. Okay, the first one is going to be patient and practitioner relationship. The second one is going to be adherence to medical advice. The third one is going to be types of pain. Fourth is going to be stress, and fifth is going to be health promotion. That's one thing covered. The second thing that I want to clarify before we start on is why we're doing health psychology, like how is psychology and health related. So under health psychology, we are basically looking at how psychology and physiology work together hand in hand, right? So psychology has everything to do with your psyche, your brain, whereas physiology is everything to do with your body, right? So everything biological. So when we look at health psychology from patient practitioner till health promotion, you are going to look at the different ways how a human body or a human nature responds to the psyche of that particular human. So for example, how does health affect psyche and how does psyche affect health, that vice versa relationship, that's one thing. The second thing is how patients basically gain knowledge and from these factors of health, okay, and how they actually implement them, those in their psychological or mental health. And so if I look at it topic wise, so when I look at patient and practitioner, that is telling you how a person and their relationship with their practitioner, which is basically their doctor or pediatrician, whatever, how does that affect their mental health. Okay, let's say we talk about stress. Okay, so does how does stress affect your physiological and your psychological health. Similar with pain, how does pain affect your physiological and psychological health. Hence we just were holistically looking at the relationship between health, we're looking at the relationship between psychology and health, in the sense that we're looking at both mental and physiological health, so both mental and biological health in some sense or the other, both mental and biological effects. Okay, so that's the basic idea that we're following through. And one thing that you will need to remember while throughout you're doing this, that we are just looking at how these factors would affect our psyche and how we need to understand this particular healthcare in order to fight them. So that's pretty much it. Okay, we're going to start with patient and practitioner. Patient is basically a person who goes to the pediatrician or a doctor with symptoms, and they want to know what's wrong with them basically. And practitioner is basically the person who's checking you, who's looking at your symptoms. So that's a doctor, could be a gynecologist, could be a neurologist, anything whatsoever. So I'm going to read from the black course book that we've got, and and then I'm going to explain. Okay, so right. So the first thing we are looking at is interpersonal skills. Now, what are interpersonal skills? Is basically inter means between people, personal means personal. Okay, so the relationship or the interaction between two people, which is basically the patient and the practitioner, that is what interpersonal skills are, right? So they could be vocal, they could be non-vocal, they could be communicative, they could be non-communicative. They do not actually have to be words, it could just be your gestures. Okay, so all of those will be counted under interpersonal skills, because those are that's basically counted as the communication between a patient and a practitioner. So that's interpersonal skills, and that's the first thing to look at. So they're saying the first step for a patient needing healthcare is typically to make an appointment to see a general practitioner. This may be someone they have never seen before, or a familiar harder recognition of such influences health psychologists to piece together an understanding of stress. Sorry, yeah, both medical and psychological care is ill health. For ill health is improving, but much can be gained from avoiding ill health and maintaining good health. That is the province of health promotion, etc., etc., etc. So they're giving us. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I actually read the wrong paragraph. Yeah, sorry. So this may be for someone they have never seen before or a familiar doctor. The confidence this individual inspires in the patient through their verbal and non-verbal communication. So that is basically both will count under interpersonal skills. So interpersonal skill is communication between patient and practitioner, okay, or two people, and that communication could be verbal and non-verbal, and that's what they're talking about. That once you go and see a practitioner, that's the first way that you communicate. It could be verbal, it could be non-verbal. And that basically affects how, that is basically a variable that will affect how your relationship with your practitioner is, how much you will listen to them, how you are basically, are you going to go back to them, how you're going to decide if that's your, uh, if you trust that particular doctor, all of those things. So McKinsey and Mang study shows that doctors' clothing is one factor that may influence this trust. So interpersonal skills, verbal and non-verbal, will ultimately decide if you trust your practitioner, if you trust your doctor, right? So looking at the first study for health psychology for patient and practitioner is non-verbal communication by McKinsey and Wang, who said that clothing would be a variable or would be a factor that would affect a patient's decision to trust their practitioner. How? We're going to look at that. So they investigated doctors' clothing as a form of non-verbal communication. So no words exchanged, because you would just be looking at clothes. A total of 475 patients from 30 different doctors from 5 general medical centers in one area of Scotland were interviewed about their opinions based on 8 photographs. So what we know is that the sample was 475. They were from 30 different doctors. There were 5 general medical centers, and they were in Scotland. So we will always just weigh our strengths and weaknesses as soon as we read this. The images were of a male doctor or a female doctor, each dressed differently but in a similar pose. They were asked 4 things. The first thing they were asked was that who would they be the happiest seeing, and they would have to rate from 0 to 5. So 0 being I wouldn't be happy seeing this doctor, 5 being yeah, I'd be happy seeing this doctor. Second, and all of this was based on their doctor's clothing in that particular photograph that they were shown, which is in the book on the right side, diagram 8.1. The second question is whether they would have more confidence in the ability of one of these doctors based on their appearance. So they would be like, okay, would you, in which doctor you would have the most confidence based on their appearance again. Then the third question they were asked was whether they would be unhappy about consulting any of them. So looking at just their appearance, just the way they're dressed, will there be a particular doctor they wouldn't be very comfortable or happy meeting, or just having trust in. And the last one was which doctor looked like most like their own doctor, which would basically show us what their actual particular choice is, right? So that's the 4 things that the patients were asked, or the sample was asked, and we have already described the sample, which was 475 patients, right? um, I'm sorry, I had to pause for a second. Right, so we were discussing the 4 questions that the patients would be asked. Then finally, they were asked a series of general closed questions about doctors' dress. Closed questions we already know is more like rating scales, Likert scales. They're not open questions. People cannot answer subjectively. It's objective questionnaires. The interviewer sampled patients at different times of the day on 5 occasions at each surgery, seeing on average just over 70% of available patients. The results showed that patients significantly preferred male doctors. So that now we're looking at the results. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. We have already seen the procedure, how they're going to be shown the photographs, how they're going to be asked the 4 questions, and now we're just looking at the results. So first result that they found out is that most patients preferred a male doctor wearing a formal suit and tie. Okay, so that would be photo number B, photo letter B, sorry, not number. They also prefer female doctors in a white lab coat, photo number F, sorry, again, letter F, although not significantly more so than females in a smart skirt and blouse. The preferences for traditionally dressed doctors were most apparent in older patients and those in higher social classes. Why? First of all, in older, now this is the second result we're looking at. So first, we already know what they preferred in male and what they preferred in female. The second thing we're finding out is that people, older patients and people from social classes basically had traditionally, preferred traditionally doctors more. Why? Because first of all, for people older patients, because that is a tradition that has been built, so they actually look at experienced doctors in that particular light. So someone for them wearing a skirt, or someone wearing a lab coat or just a coat, sorry, not a lab coat but just a suit or a coat, wouldn't be that traditional. It wouldn't be that stereotypical. So older patients would always place their trust in someone they know is wearing a lab coat, because that is traditional view of a doctor or of an experienced practitioner. Similarly, when you're talking about social classes, that is that people from the higher class would always believe that they can afford and prefer the best, right? So because they have the cash for it, they can pay for it, and because of that, they will always prefer somebody who, and they will always have this viewpoint that we are going to choose a professional. So from the eyes of someone from a higher social class, they are looking for a professional which they can easily pay, right? So looking at that perspective, we know that this they will choose someone in a lab coat, because again, those are the ones that seem like a professional to these higher class people. Look, moving forward, although 28% patients reported that they would be unhappy seeing one of the doctors shown, usually the informally dressed one, some patients said they dislike the doctor wearing a white lab coat. So they've given us the third result, that they wouldn't be happy seeing someone who was dressed casually amongst the photographs. Nevertheless, now this is the fourth result. 64% said that the way doctors, that the way their doctors dressed was quiet or very important. Overall, female doctors received higher ratings than male doctors, but with regard to gender differences between patients, only one was found that female. So first thing that they're telling us, that most of them said that yes, it was important how their doctors would dress. And another thing that they found with this, that there were no major gender differences, but there was the just one single gender difference between in a patient, where they basically ranked the male doctor in a tweed jacket higher than male patients did, right? So there was this one gender difference. However, there was a variation between patients from different medical centers, with some showing much stronger preferences for a male doctor in a suit against a male doctor in jeans, and others being less extreme. So another example of they've given of how they were not preferring casually dressed doctors in comparison to formally dressed doctors. So not preferred in casually, okay? When asked about their confidence in doctors' ability, 41% expressed a preference for one photograph, predominantly the formally dressed one, although 9 had most confidence in male doctor in jeans and 13 in the female doctor in trousers. Again, a very detailed result you've got here, pretty straightforward. Based on the way the doctors were dressed in the photographs, 41% of patients said that they would have more confidence in one of the doctors, suggesting that the way a practitioner dresses matches to their performance. The data about similarity to the patient's own doctor was difficult to analyze, as some patients did not respond or gave two answers. However, many more patients in one practice said that the doctor looked most likely like the smartly dressed one, while in another few did. So they're just saying that the fourth question was not very well answered, because most people did not answer it, or if they answered it, it was, let's say, double ended, like two answers, or even the ones who answered it, they chose the smartly dressed one. This difference was reflected in their choices, with those having a formally dressed doctors preferring one dressed like that. So for example, someone who was preferring a formally dressed doctor, in this question they also chose formally dressed doctor as their own. So that was one thing that they're explaining us here. We've got table here, table 8.2, where they are basically they're showing us percentages of how many patients thought that doctors should wear a white coat. So there were 15%, they should wear a suit, 44%, tie 67%. How many thought that they would object to male doctor wearing jeans? There was 59%. Wearing an earring, there was 55%. Having long hair, 46% would object to that. So all of these examples are also given. This was another, let's say, a survey. Now they're telling us that 8.2 was analyzed by social class and gender and revealed a few differences. Although higher social classes objected more to male doctors wearing an earring and to female doctor wearing lots of jewelry, and more than male than female doctors thought that women doctors should generally wear white coats. So they're showing us here that the social people who from a higher social class did not think that it was appropriate for any of the gender of the doctor, any genders in the doctor, to wear jewelry. Okay, so that's one thing that they're showing. And another thing they're saying here is that more male than female patients thought that women doctors should wear white coats. So more males were saying, so this is another gender difference that was found after the survey was conducted in table 8.2, that more male patients thought that, oh my god, female patients should wear a lab coat. So that's another thing. Moving towards the end, in general, the findings show that patients prefer formally dressed doctors, although this is somewhat affected by age, social class, and particular medical practice used. So, holistically, they found the answer to McKinstry and Wang found the answer that yes, doctors should be formally dressed. However, the patient's preference would vary from other factors as well, such as social class, gender, and age. Okay, so someone from who would be old would definitely prefer someone who is formally dressed. Similarly, someone who is from a higher social class would most likely to be prefer someone who's semi-formal, formal, like that. Patients also preferred doctors dressed in the manner of their current doctor. So again, the current doctor's dressing, they're related to that. So there's a relatable thing that's going on here, relatable result. Then we have the last thing that they're concluding their results with. McKinsey and Wang observed that it would have been useful to have, so this is now criticizing their own research, it would have been useful to have included a photograph of a female doctor in a formal suit, and that had this been included in the preference for the female, and the white coat might not have been so apparent. Conversely, the pressure for women to conform to a formal stereotype may be greater. For example, more patients objected to the idea of a female than a male doctor in jeans. On the basis, McKinsey and Wang were reluctant to advise the female doctors wear white coats. Nevertheless, the study did her best to successfully avoid the risk of patients giving the answer they thought that was wanted, rather than one they felt to be correct. Demand characteristics was reduced. This is illustrated by the findings that many patients who said they felt the way the doctor dressed was not important still gave discriminatory scores in assessing the photographs. So two things. First thing, they're saying that they should have added another female photograph where they should have shown a female in a suit, because they did not do that. That is why most votes for the female was for the female who was wearing a lab coat, because it was formal and then casual. It wasn't formal, semi-formal, casual. So there was not enough variation. That is why they should have added one more photograph of a female doctor in a suit. That's what they thought. And the second thing they're talking about here is that the demand characteristics were very minimal. How do they know that? Because people who had voted that they did not care about how their doctor was dressed, they would still respond in a particular manner for the other questions. So they were still responding in an accurate manner. They were still, being judgmental and giving an accurate response even if they did not care. So that showed that there were no major demand characteristics. That is the first study for patient and practitioner health psychology, and we're going to stop here.